purchasing things above that $2 million range. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that you're right. There is some competition coming into the market.
The interest rates in the loan market has really made it tough the last 6 months.
If you're buying things that are 2 million, 3 million in EBITDA, the exit multiples jump.
We would have brought that 17% equity as part of the whole deal.
Tell me, let's recap, let's recap what we do. Like, obviously you're from Reno. What do you do in Reno?
I live in Reno, grew up in the East Coast in Pennsylvania, moved out west not long after my undergraduate work to do a master's. And then at that time in my life, I was 23 or whatever, the most important things to me were skiing, rock climbing, mountain biking, those kinds of things. And I ended up doing a PhD at University of Reno because it was a cool location near Tahoe and a field I enjoyed. Yeah, and we were supposed to live here for a few years and then move back up to Seattle where my wife's from. But here we are 12 years, 13 years later. And my wife's a veterinarian. She's a practice owner. And so that's her main gig. We also do a lot of real estate investments, but all in the Midwest. And then I still work for an environmental consulting company in my current field, which is I really don't have a lot to complain about, I guess, other than, I'm a goal setter. And at some point you're like, I feel like I could achieve more and want to achieve more. And so I'd say after we bought the hospital with another partner, I say we, I mean, really, this is mostly my wife. I'm emotional support and some financial guidance at times, but she's driving that and she does an incredible job. Hardest working woman I know. And I will just say this about veterinarians in general. They're the hardest working group of professionals that I know. And it's just incredible to see them. But after we bought that, we started to realize power of ownership, investments. We both, science people really didn't have any training in finance or how money works, for example. And so started to really educate myself on that and made use of some home equity we had in Reno because we were able to buy at a really good time. And obviously the last few years prices have just been crazy. We were able to use that and leverage that into, we partner with my brother-in-law, and we've got a couple million worth of real estate investments now, and that's been really solid. And so lately it's been harder to find real estate investments, I feel like, that are at least fitting our buy box. And then we did just close on 8 units though, so that was good. But
where are the 8 units?
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
I love that city.
Dude, I went out there to visit some of our other properties in January, and I was pretty blown away because I'd never been there. I identified it as a market that seemingly was growing, had good proximity to some other larger cities, Chicago, Minneapolis, etc. I like the state of Iowa. From my background, I have a lot of climate understanding in my life, and from a natural disaster perspective, I was better. They're going to avoid most of the hurricanes that we're going to see a lot of. So I liked it from that perspective too. And I said, well, I need to get out there. And I spent a day with my property manager, drove all over the city, got to know it. And I was just like, this place is booming. It's clean. It's got some good food. There's a little section of town called Croatian inspired.
My arch nemesis, my background, my family heritage is half Serbian. And so
okay.
the Serbian and the Croats, they were always fighting with each other.
Totally. Yeah, man. Yeah. So anyways, just to build off what you said, I was blown away by that city, just in not what I expected from a Midwestern city. It was booming, very clean. I had a great meal downtown, a bougie bar, brewery type place. And I was just like, wow, I didn't see this coming. I was happy, and we're continuing to try to invest in that area.
So let's talk about that, right? So Cedar Rapids, Iowa, you guys just bought an 8 unit there. The 3 most important things in real estate are location, right? Tell me why that 8 unit was a great location and why you decided that you wanted to pull the trigger on it.
Good questions. I kind of talked a little bit about Cedar Rapids in general, just from not explosive population growth. I mean, it's not what some of the other pandemic areas saw, but it was steady. And sometimes I appreciate steady and slow over trying to get on the bandwagon of everything else. So I like that too. It's not I'm not competing against thousands of other investors, I feel when I'm making choices, which also helps me to not get into bidding wars and be able to kind of dictate stuff on my own terms. These particular particular buildings are two fourplexes, like they share a parking lot. They're in actually Marion, Iowa, which is kind of like the other half of Cedar Rapids, basically. Very nice suburb. Properties were mid 90s built. So I like the age, knowing that, okay, I don't have like, there's stuff, don't get me wrong, but like, and then the other part is their area, this suburb of Marion, like you go a quarter mile north of where these fourplexes are. Well, first of all, in their neighborhood, there's lots of really nice single family homes that are, in the $300,000-$400,000 range. And I bought these. We got 8 units we paid $472 for them.
That's great.
Yeah, it was a good deal. And their peak rent, if we get them all up to $800 a unit, will, greatly beat the 1% rule.
Yeah, you're 1.5% per door.
Yeah, it's really nice. You can see the high school from them. It's a nice high school. Like it's not, it's a good one. It's a safe area. And so I just, all those factors came together. They were brought to me fully off market from my property manager, who's brought me other deals as well, because he knows we'll close if they're good. And so all of those things, we had the property manager in place. We had a good location. They were cash flowing. They were going to continue to cash flow and had some upside on them too. And then just kind of banking on some appreciation in the area. Really nice. Yeah.
Awesome. What other markets are you guys invested in?
I have properties in St. Joe, Missouri, and I have property in Joplin, Missouri as well. And
friends in Joplin.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you know them, but I'll connect you with some of those friends so that way you guys can work together.
That'd be great. Yeah. Also good markets, different markets. Joplin's seen a lot of growth and is going to continue to see a lot of growth, I think. They just they're building a new dental school in Joplin. So that's kind of a nice little perk. And then, it's only, it's like an hour and a half from Bentonville, Arkansas. So it's kind of getting that Walmart hub sort of expansion area. Okay. I only own one home there. And then St. Joe, we've got 10 houses, which is more of just a cash flow play market. All Burrs, own 10 homes, but I don't think I have any actual money sitting in Joplin, if you know what I mean. Then they're all cash flowing well. In St. Joe.
That's okay. So for those who are listening and don't know what a burr is, can you explain what that is?
Yeah. Basic principle is I buy a completely destroyed home or mostly destroyed home, but a property at discount. Typically try to pay cash for that. And then I bring the value up enough by renovating it so that I can then put a loan on it, take a cash out refinance that covers all the money I already invested. I essentially get my money back, then I rent the property, and ideally it's cash flowing, and then I take all the money I used and I go to the next one. So okay. Burr is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat.
Awesome. And keep on rolling that money into the future deals.
That's the idea, although it's been challenging because the interest rates in the loan market has really made it tough the last 6 months. There's still deals to be had, but they're not quite as juicy as they were, when you were getting debt at 4%. Now my mortgage payments my interest payment on that, $100,000-$200,000 house is double what it was, a year ago. And so we've slowed down on that a little bit, and we're kind of waiting for we have some equity locked into a couple other investment properties that we'll get back and we'll probably get going again, but it's been harder. We just turned one down in St. Joe because we called the bankers and, they're getting really tight. At least our loan partners are getting a lot tighter with what they want to loan from a total amount and also just the interest rates. So one lender who used to basically just loan us 80% of the ARV after repair value, he's like, well, he's only loaning on debt coverage service. So wow. DCSR, wow. Meaning that previous house, say I had $100,000 of value in it, I could get $80,000 out. Depending on what it rents for, I might only get $60,000 back out or wow. 55, depending on how he has a little formula that I don't know that I fully understood. But anyways, it just was coming in where we were getting about 60% of the ARV.
Wow. So that probably makes it really tough right now. And because they're not only changing it, obviously the interest rates have gone up a lot, but now the guidelines on how they're underwriting and lending have also changed. You're getting kind of hit from both mm-hmm. sides on it. So then what's the next move? What do you pivot to?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And there's an argument to be made that now's just keep buying, just handle, leave some money in your deal. Or, if you find a deal that breaks even, but you still have to leave 20K in it, you should just keep doing that. And so we've thought about that, and we probably will do some of those deals here in the future. Another thing we've started to focus on is, like I mentioned, we bought an 8 unit. We're really trying to move into larger deals,
Like what kind of larger deals?
Ideally, something in the 20 to 50 type range, units wise, looking at stuff that's, more in the $1-2 million, $3 million purchase price, and allows us the same thing where we can put a bunch of money in it, get it updated, get it up to market rent, get the management in place, and bring value back to it. And we still see some of the same issues with that. Like, ideally, you can again refinance that property after you've got it stabilized, and then you can get all your equity back out. Most of the underwriting I've done recently, you're looking, maybe you get 80% of your equity back out. Not terrible, but you might have to just suffer through some like slightly lower percent returns until we start seeing interest rates come back down into I don't believe they'll be 0% again, but I do think we'll start getting down into the 4s, and just 4s for refinances, 5s for refinances. That's going to stabilize, I think, at that. So that's what we've been doing. The other thing, I think where you and I maybe cross paths a lot too, is I've been pretty active in searching for another business.
Awesome.
And so that's been taking
about that, man. Tell me all about it. I'm in that world right now, big time. Well, I mean, I've been in that world for a long time, but now I'm like actively campaigning and looking for stuff to purchase.
Yeah. Similarly, in the same boat, we definitely have identified that like now can be a very good time to buy a business. A couple of reasons that we've pinpointed. One, a lot of these businesses didn't do a great job of pricing in the inflation that came through. And so, they're running on slightly lower margins, but there's room to enable them. Two, as many of us in this world know, like, the boomer generation who owns tons of businesses are starting to, put forth their exit plans. So stuff's coming on market. And then three, I recently read that, exit multiples on EBITDA are almost at their lowest that they have been in some time right now. So for a buyer like you or me, it could prove to be a solid time to get something. And then again, as debt becomes cheaper and those EBITDA multiples start to come higher up, you have a good chance at a good exit value. So we've had a couple deals. One, it was a really hard pill to swallow. It's going to be good, but we had to pull out. It just didn't work out.
What kind of business was it?
So this was interesting, and I'll just preface this with like my search, because we're tied heavily to the Reno area. We have 2 little girls. They're 5 and almost 8, we're engaged. And so we've been largely focused in this geography. And with my wife running a veterinary hospital, there's only so much time one can travel about. So we're trying to keep our regions nearby. So this business was here in Reno. It was actually a pallet manufacturing company, which was really, really intriguing. If you think about it, it's super simple, right? It's like you buy lumber and you put it together like Legos. And that was highly attractive.
Many different ways to make money in a pallet business, like things that I'm sure you've thought about, but looking from the outside in, have no idea that there's easily 5 different ways to make business or to make money in that business right away. And on top of that, it's very simple labor.
Yep.
Doesn't take a rocket scientist to build a pallet.
Nope, absolutely not. So this particular business, we liked it for a couple of reasons. Positioned in Reno, that was a big checkbox. 2, had about the EBITDA value we were looking for. We're mostly shopping. We don't, to me, anything below 500 is just not quite, the juice quite isn't worth it for me to depart what I'm currently doing. After you factor in debt and stuff, you're like, well, I'm not actually like doing any better than it was. So, you got to be this was sitting their last 3 years. I think we're running 700, and then they had a 1.2, and then they had a 2 million. And then their T12 was back down to about 1.6.
Gross rev?
No, in EBITDA net.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere in an average about 1.2 ish.
Yeah, I think we valued it at 1.4. I think what we did is our value was going to be, it was on 1.4 million of EBITDA, and I think we were looking at about a 3.8 multiple on it.
Wow, that's really strong.
Well, so the other reason is it also was coming with, so that was only the business part. Okay. It also came with 13 acres of land, of which they operate on. So then we had to consider an offer on the land, which is probably going to be, so our total offer package was going to be we were looking at about 7 million on the total package. Okay. So here's where we had a full sit down, and it was getting really exciting. We started to learn, one of the things they said is like, well, one, we were a little concerned about the readjusted declining EBITDA in the T12. It's like, well, what's going on? So if you look at lumber prices over the last, 5 years, really, it's pretty steady all the way until the pandemic, right? And then we all know what happened in the pandemic. Lumber pricing went through the roof.
Yeah.
by 5 times almost. So when you look at the revenue of the company, they hold tons of inventory in lumber. So he bought a lot of inventory at a pretty low price pre-pandemic, just because that's their standard operating procedure. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great idea. So he had a bunch of lumber in there. Then the lumber pricing comes up. He's able to pull the pallet pricing up quite a bit and was turning really big profits. So now if you look at the lumber market, there were 2 spikes. One in about late 2020, came back down, and then again, kind of like summer to fall 2021. So what he was able to do is be smart enough, great businessman, to have a bunch of lumber on hand. And when he saw that price go back down, that lag between those two, stockpiled again, right? So he's buying cheap, selling high. So we got concerned because we're now at base lumber prices again. So if you're just steady Eddie on the base lumber prices, like where does that leave you from, a net profitability standpoint? So we requested, like all the financial history they had, I think we got back to like 2013. Okay. And lo and behold, even though, they basically sent us raw numbers, and I'm sure there was still profit. I know there was profitability in it, wasn't anywhere near like, 2 million or 1.5. We got pretty scared about our prospect of being able to continue that high pricing, even as lumber prices have returned to normal. And I think it was something we couldn't get over. We exited at that point.
I mean, that's kind of like, it's not really rejection, but it's really like deflation, right? Because like, I know for me, if I'm in a deal and I'm working and I'm investing all this time, and then all of a sudden you find this big red flag, you're like, I found this big red flag and this sucks because this looked really, really promising. So like, how do you lift yourself back up? Like, how do you bounce back from that?
I'm glad you asked that. Like, it's emotional. You're kind of like heartbroken on one hand. Like, this to me, I was like, this is so good. Like, and we were both very excited, my other partner and I. And, all I could do is get back on the train, man. I mean, there's only, if I lay around and just start to tell myself, I'll never find a good deal, like, and you just get down in dumps, it's not going to help anyone, and it's not going to help you. So, me, I kind of mentioned my previous life, not my previous life, but like outdoor recreation enthusiast. Yeah. Ski mountaineering. I like to do really big, long trail runs that gain a lot of elevation, and it's mental. It's just like when I'm running up to the top of a mountain, like it's just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that's kind of how I apply to the search. It's like, the first one can't always be the winner, and you just got to keep on moving. So that's my mentality about it. And in a way, it's like kind of a numbers game, like you look through 1,000 businesses, hopefully one of them, right, works out in a good way, or 2 or 3 or whatever. But, I would also say our investment thesis is, I don't know, maybe conservative is not the right word, but like skeptical. We're always aware of the risks that present, especially when buying a business, because as like oftentimes this one did come with real estate, but a lot of them don't. You talk to the bank then, and they're like, okay, so we're putting all of our marbles in you guys. Like there's no asset to like grab if this goes south. There's no asset to sell. There's no like natural appreciation. Like that's why people love real estate, is like, because in real estate, if you just like hold your breath long enough and like it'll work out. But like in business, not really the case. Like you can head south. And so you have to just be careful, I think, especially when, if you're going to take on like this, we're talking that deal could have been $6-7 million in debt. So not a like.
So cautious. Talk about that a little bit. So it was going to have real estate, and then you're going to have a business component to it as well. How would you have taken that deal down, and what would have that looked like as far as the monetary structure of it?
Yeah. So we had term sheets from banks. We were looking at funding the max SBA part of it. Typically on, an SBA loan will be up to $5 million. And what our plan was to try to get as much of the purchase price allocated to real estate as possible. If you can get over 50% of your purchase price allocated to an asset, such as real estate, then you can pull your loan into like a 25-year term. From a cash flow perspective, that's killer. Huge. Now, and plus interest rates on a real estate backed loan through the bank we were working with, we're looking at the time of about 6.5-ish. Wow. Versus if you're on like a strict SBA 7A loan without real estate, you're looking at right now 10.5%. Yeah. So like big differences in that kind of money. And so what we would have done is we were looking at about, I think we were probably going to bring 15 to 20% equity to the deal. It was looking like what the banks were wanting, say 17 or 18% of cash. And then we had SBA covering another 4 million. And then we were looking at a commercial topper to that loan. So that would have been, maybe another 1.5 million on the commercial topper. And so the commercial topper would have been trickier. Commercial loans have a lot more covenants associated with, and they also, might be tougher terms to deal with. So we wanted to put as little as possible onto the commercial topper, as much as possible into the SBA, but also not like bring so much equity to the deal that it was like not worth it. That's kind of how we were initially going to do it. But yeah, like I said, we pulled out before the finish.
Yeah. So were you going to also bring in some investors for the difference, or were you going to have that commercial topper basically handle the close?
No. So we would have brought that 17% equity as part of the whole deal. So that's we have our team. I have 2 team members that are a mix of active, but also capital partners in a much more liquid position, and they've had some successful exits of businesses recently. And so they're kind of looking for opportunities like this. And then, so we would have brought that cash. I'd be bringing cash too, and there is the opportunity, like we could have done how you might structure like a syndication. I mean, I think this deal on paper was looking so good that I don't think it would have been challenging to raise, money from, say, a pool of LP investors. But in this case, we were hoping to keep it to the 3 of us.
That's awesome. I know you pulled out because you found some red flags that you didn't like, but is there, now this was obviously a while ago too. How long ago was this that you guys kind of dropped this?
April.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't go back now and ask for updated financials to see what's going on, and maybe you can do a retrade?
It's not a bad idea. I mean, it'd be worth it. I really want to know if they closed the deal. From the brokers we were working with, apparently they were kind of meeting with 3 to 4 buyers. And I don't know what the other buyers were, but when I called them and just said, I don't think this is the deal for us, they didn't seem to lose too much sleep over that. Okay. So I'm kind of guessing they're in contract, but it would be it's a good idea. I should probably just reach out and be like, hey, I'm just kind of curious, like, where are things standing? I also wanted to see if they had anything else in the pipeline that would be suitable for us as well. But yeah, it was a very, very attractive deal at first. And I mean, for all I know, it was going to be, it could have been a brilliant plan the whole time, but I will just say, like, staring down that kind of debt and with some not clear ability to maintain profitability, like, because we were already seeing, the percent profitability, the percent margin was already shrinking in the T12. And I think that's what threw us. It was like, wait, we need to kind of rethink this process. And we got deeper into the profitability. We got deeper into the COGS. And it really came down to, like, it's kind of a commodity driven business. It's tied to lumber pricing. If you can buy low and sell high, you're going to kill it. But if you're kind of buying, average and selling average, you're going to be at a much lower EBITDA that would not cover the debt we were having to take on for it. So, and the other thing too is, like, I don't know what you're seeing, but I just read an article the other day that private equity, non-individual investors, private equity corporations are starting to move their buy boxes into these lower tier EBITDAs as well. More private equity firms are coming into the 750 to $2 million EBITDA range, whereas previously they're usually operating in the greater than 3 million EBITDA range. I don't have a clear understanding why, but I think we're starting to see some heightened competition for what I would call search funders or individual investors.
Yeah, I find that interesting because typically they're going to be purchasing things above that $2 million range. And I think that you're right. There is some competition coming into the market. I also think that some of these PE firms and family offices have kind of been shown how much we can increase EBITDA, not easily, but how quickly we can increase EBITDA and then double the exit multiple. And so I think that institutions are trying, they're trying their hand, they're trying their luck at these things because they've brought on other people to put into their organization who are going to be running that smaller division.
Yeah. This article pointed out that one of the things they think may be happening is a lot of these private equity firms may have gotten onto a larger platform style business like an HVAC company with the expectation of growing the EBITDA organically, but maybe having a difficult time doing that and thus not hitting their investment target from their original thesis. So now they're resorting to gobbling up smaller ones to, rapidly kind of grow so that they can hit their timeline of investment. I don't know what the answer is or how real it is, to be honest. Like, it's different in every arena, but I think I'm seeing that a little bit. But so where are you into right now?
Buying businesses, right? We currently have our general contracting company, here in Southern California. We also own a specialty tax company that helps businesses get different types of tax credits from the government. There are 2 tax credits that we specialize in. One being, it's called the Employee Retention Credit. That one is a COVID era program that was put into place alongside the PPP program. That's for businesses that had trouble during COVID. It's basically a COVID COVID stimulus package for businesses that retained employees. So we've got that one. And then the other very large and long-term tax credit that we're working with is the research and development credit. So that's any kind of business that's either improving a product or improving a process or testing new methods. Basically, the purpose of the program, which was put into place in the Reagan administration, it's been around for a very long time. The purpose of the program is to ultimately grow the economy. When they grow the economy, they grow their revenue, they grow their tax revenue, which means we pay more taxes. So what the government is doing is they give businesses almost a dollar for dollar tax credit, and it's a refundable tax credit. If a business is trying new stuff, they don't have to succeed, but if they're trying new stuff, the government literally sends them a check for trying that stuff. If they've already paid up all their income taxes and their payroll taxes, if they're paid up on that, they literally get a check from the Treasury.
Yeah. So is there a market restriction to that? I mean, like there's clearly, the spectrum of trying new things could be like broadly interpreted. And, one could be like a high level R&D exercise on how to abate, carbon in the atmosphere versus, my arborist company is trying out, a different method for falling trees. So like, how do you interpret that?
Yeah. So the tax code's pretty clear on it. And, there's certain boxes that we have to check in order to meet that criteria. But any R&D quote unquote exercise can be qualified expenses, right? And it's all based on the expenses. So money that a business spends, it's not tied to the amount of employees you have. You can also use expenses from third-party vendors, from subcontract as well. So for example, like the high level, reducing carbon in the atmosphere, right? There's pretty clear, like, hey, we're testing these new methods, or we're testing this new way of doing that. And those expenses, direct and the indirect costs, are also qualified. So that's how encompassing both of the direct and indirect gets you the dollar for dollar refund. And then if we're talking about the arborist testing out new methods to fall trees, they have to, like I said, they have to meet some certain criteria. But let's say they're developing new rigging that's never been done before, developing some new tools, or even new training methods, those things can be eligible. So, and what we end up doing is we do a deep dive into the business. We have multiple interviews with the owners or managers or whoever's running the company. We look at their financials and we give them a range of estimate. And then after we give them that range and they agree that range is okay and they like the number, then we'll dive even deeper into the company. We ask for 4 years of financials and we go back. The cool thing is, you heard about the Inflation Reduction Act, right? They doubled the amount of R&D credits. So it used to be $50,000 per year. Now it's $500,000 per year.
Wow.
And when they did that, they also look back 3 years. So we can go 2020, 2021, and 2022, and it's 250, 250, and 500. So we can go look back and get $1 million back for a business on qualified expenses.
Is there a minimum business size? Anything like that? Just has to be R&D.
It has to be R&D. So for example, right now we're helping a software development company, and they don't have any W-2 employee, but they're developing software, and I can't tell you what it's for because it's proprietary. But it's the husband and the wife that run the company, and they've spent millions of dollars on development, hiring third-party developers to build this thing that they're going to be launching to the market. Most all of their expenses are qualified for R&D because they are literally creating something brand new to the marketplace that's never been done before. And
it would seem like a lot of startups would like be able to win that credit as long as your startup isn't like, is somewhat novel, like a tech startup to some extent. Right?
Yeah, it's huge in the tech world. There are a lot of tech companies that are taking advantage of it. There are a lot that aren't taking advantage enough, if that makes sense. They're just not writing off, but they're claiming maybe only 20% of what they really could claim because they don't know all the ins and outs of the program. That's where our firm comes in, is like, we know the ins and outs. And on top of that, our firm is extremely unique because we also sign on the dotted line with the client and do full audit representation. So if the IRS ever questions or sends a letter or anything, our firm does that. And that's no extra charge. That's just part of the deal.
And so when you get the credit, is that how you're paid, or is companies paying you up front?
No, they pay, well, there's two ways. If they're getting a check, then we get paid when they get their check.
Right.
But a business can also use that money on their next quarterly installments. So rather than paying their quarterly income tax installment or their quarterly payroll expense, quarter tax expense, they can now use that credit in place of the payment.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So it's instant cash flow for the business.
Yeah.
If they decide they want to use it that way, then they have to pay us.
Right. I get it.
Yeah. But if they're waiting for a check, we don't get paid until they get money. So either way, we get paid when they get money.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. It's probably really helpful for a lot of businesses. Comes to mind for a couple of things that I've had in mind, but that is awesome.
Well, and so I tell business owners, like when I'm talking to them about it, and they're like, I've never heard of this, or yeah, we've done a little bit of it. We now can help them plan 4 years into the future to recapture $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
4 years into the future, they'll be able to recapture $2 million on qualified expenses. So I tell them, moving forward, I want you to think about how you're spending money in your business. Think about how you can customize anything you purchase to qualify for R&D.
Yeah, planning purposes.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. So anyway, so we've got those two. We've got the construction, we've got the tax credit company, and we're also looking at, buying other blue collar businesses. We're looking at things that have monthly recurring revenue.
Sure.
That's our number one. Things that have not low barrier to entry, but lower skilled labor. So for a while, we were looking at solar companies, buying solar companies, which are still a great option. Solar is in this like strange dip right now where a company that's got less than $1 million in EBITDA, you can pick up for 3 to 3.5 times. If you're buying things that are 2 million, 3 million in EBITDA, the exit multiples jump. 7 to 12.
Oh, wow.
7 to 12. And we're talking about private equity. Institutional money is buying at 10 to 12 right now.
Yeah, it's hard to compete.
But you have to have at least $3 million in EBITDA to be in the exit multiple. So a lot of people, I have a good friend of mine who's doing this right now. He actually is closing, he's supposed to close on my birthday, but they had to delay a little bit. They're closing a deal right now. And that company does almost $2 million. I think it is $2 million in EBITDA, buying it for a crazy multiple that I can't even tell you because it's so crazy. His whole entire goal is to now skyrocket this company and then exit that company for a 10x multiple.
Yeah. So when you look at solar companies, there's a couple different approaches, right? There's some that are like basically the marketing, they're just salesmen and door to door, they've come to your door, they've come to my door. That's one arm. Then those guys are outsourcing to larger companies like Titan to do the installs. Or you have some of your smaller shops that are kind of all in one. You have your sales and installation. So where on that spectrum are you guys looking? And I've looked at some of the marketing framework ones. Seems a little, I don't know, not for me, I don't think. Some concerns again, just like you're kind of taught, you're only as good as your next sale, as opposed to, you mentioned reoccurring revenue. But, I'm with you on solar, like tailwinds for sure. So anyways, where do you guys fall on that?
You're right. Solar industry is very fragmented. There is the installation component and there's the sales component. Not two companies do both.
Right.
Companies we're looking at are primarily installation companies and they happen to have inside sales. But a lot of installation companies don't focus on sales. Like sometimes it's just the business owner or the manager who's kind of just going on sales calls and not really sales calls. They're more of like an evaluation of the homeowner's property or the commercial. So where we fall more is we were looking a lot at installation companies to be able to expand that. The issues that I've found recently, and I have a close friend of mine who currently owns a solar company and they've owned it for a number of years. It's a family run operation here where I live and they're doing great. They thought about selling. I think they're reconsidering now, but I'm not particularly looking at purchasing solar companies anymore.
Yeah.
It's very highly skilled labor.
Yep. Electricians are required.
Yeah. And in Southern California, there is a lot of competition in the market for being an installer. And it's getting harder and harder to find the skilled labor and retain it.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, I'm still looking at solar companies to be involved with. I'm very selective about what I'm looking at these days. Now, I do have another friend of mine who just recently acquired, I don't know if it's acquired or bought into or partnered or whatever, but they're on the marketing side and they are expanding into, I believe they're in 40 states now.
Oh, wow. That's pretty big.
It's huge. And that company is, with their knowledge and systems and processes, that company is going to be $1 billion company faster than a lot of people think, which is rad. So I'm going to be getting involved with them on that side because since we have our general contracting company,
Mm-hmm.
the way that they work is they'll be our solar division for our company.
Mm-hmm.
So we invest into their company and they contact all of our previous clients. They do all of the marketing in the local area for us. They meet with clients on Zoom calls or phone calls, and they represent us so much so that they're wearing our company gear.
Sure. Yeah.
Company logo, our company hats. We send them all of that, all of our stuff, right? All of our merch. And they go after our clients, they go after our local market, and they are now our solar partner for our new solar division in our company. So we're exploring that option a lot more than we are buying an installation company.
Yeah, leverage their framework, man. I mean, that makes sense if they got the system in place. So I recently met with the seller of a solar install company here. He got, his books weren't quite right. And he got all excited because his last year's EBITDA looked like 800. And then he found out that his accountant hadn't added back in some expenses, and he was much less than that. So he's like, oh, I'm just gonna wait. Hey, well, give me a call if you change your mind, or if you get to a point where you want to do the sell. But yeah, so interesting, because I'm in the same boat. I was looking a lot at those. I wanted to ask you, are you looking, I mean, I mentioned geography at one point. Are you looking for business acquisitions outside your regional area? And if yes, in some of these, how do you handle operations remotely? Are you looking for local operators, and what's your path forward on that? Because we've done some of that. We actually have a meet with a plumbing company that looks very strong, not huge, but in that right size. Apparently has a good management structure in place. And, I'm kind of thinking through my head, all right, how do you run something like that from afar?
So the answer is yes, we're looking at stuff that's outside of our market.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we run it is by finding a good operator who's in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
finding that operator is a challenging part.
Mm-hmm.
And we find a deal that has legs, like, for example, your plumbing company that's outside of your market. First thing is to lean on your network, to post on socials, to ask. Right? To ask people.
Yeah.
What's interesting about socials is you never know who's watching.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
Just because they don't like or comment or whatever, just because they don't interact doesn't mean they're watching.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've had people message me after I do a post and they've never interacted with the post or previous posts. And they'll send me a message and say, hey, I've been watching what you're doing. How can I get involved? Or are you looking in this area? Or I know this person who I can connect you with. And so finding an operator is really doing social posts, leaning on your network. Call local chamber of commerce is
that's interesting.
kind of a little, not hidden secret, but it's they really have their finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
I'm part of my local chamber of commerce, and years ago I never would have thought that I would have joined one, but I did earlier this year. And locally I have met so many cool people, and it's a big referral source. And when you do have an ask and you stand up, people respond, or they remember it and they'll connect you with somebody. So that's what we're looking at doing.
Yeah.
If it comes across our plate, we're looking in the local area for a good, competent operator.
This is a debate I've had internally with myself and others as to said operator, employee or partner?
Employee with profit share.
Yeah. Okay. They get a bonus check, basically. Somewhat skin in the game, but not so much that they've got 10% so that they can kind of influence in a way.
If you're taking the deal down and this operator, right? Because you're going to want the operator in place before you close.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
You can then offer them a buy-in. If they raise capital to bring to the table, then you give them an equity stake in the company. And then on top of that, you can sweeten it with a profit share on top. So once we get to, say they're doing 500,000 in EBITDA right now, once we get to 700,000, you can get a bonus pop of 5% of net profits. You structure it however you want to structure it, but
there's a lot of creative ways to get them bought in a good way. Yeah.
You can also do an earn in. So as they get to different EBITDA levels, they earn equity in the company. So you get this thing to $1 million, you get another 5% of the company.
Yeah.
That's a good way to incentivize and a good way to find out if somebody's real or they're full of it.
Yeah, because that's another filter you got to pass them through, right? Is there's a lot of talk, but when you get down to doing it, it can be tricky. This has been great, man. I appreciate the call.
Yeah, me too. It's been awesome. So tell people out there, if they're listening, I hope people are listening.
Is this on live Facebook?
It's not on live. No, it's
okay.
Yeah, it's not. No. But tell people how they can get a hold of you and go from there.
Yeah, you can find. I mean, I'm not a huge. Maybe this is I'm not very good at putting myself out there broadly, but you can reach me at just my email or on Facebook. Tim Caldwell on Facebook. Facebook or tim.caldwell19@gmail.com. Need to do better about putting myself out there and what we're doing, but that's the best way. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been great talking with you, and I really appreciate the call.
Likewise.